Making his second straight run for the White House, Texas Congressman Ron Paul's dire economic message has stayed consistent. And we heard stories on where those political views came from.
Well, I think, I was raised in a Republican family that tended, to be pretty conservative but non-political. Even in college, I was non-political. The only time I had a political concern was in 1956 when the French and the British wanted to prevent the Egyptians from taking over the canal. And I thought, God, I'm going to be drafted, And fortunately, Eisenhower said, forget it, I'm not going to war for that canal. And I thought, wow. So it took 5 years more before I was drafted. There was another crisis when I was eventually drafted. But other than that, I didn't have much thoughts.
Seems funny to say about someone who has served 12 terms in Congress, but at the dinner table, Ron Paul admits he started out a bit reluctant to serve, especially in the military.
Well, I wasn't all that anxious to go, but I ended up staying. I stayed for 5 years, and I made the best of it. But I tell the story that when I got my draft notice during the Cuban crisis, the draft notice says you're drafted, you're going to be a buck private in the Army. Then down at the bottom in the fine print it says, unless you volunteer, and then we'll allow you to be an MD, and we'll make you a captain, and you can pick the service that you want to be in. So I tell all my veterans at home, I said, I immediately volunteered. I'm a volunteer. So I made the best of it, and I got a pilot's license and flew a lot and traveled around the world.
And one of Paul's most vivid memories of the military is also a great story.
We landed at Peshawar, which is up in the northern part of Pakistan. It's not that far from the Khyber Pass. And that was one of the things that they did. Somebody who was new and had not been over there, the officers there would take you up to the Khyber Pass since it's so famous. So I remember driving up there, and I remember the commander who was taking us up there, he says, see all those mountains up there? And they are rugged, believe me. Rugged mountains. He says there are thousands of people up there. There are tribes up there. And he says people have tried to conquer them for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And he says they've never been conquered. and we drove up to the Khyber Pass. And at the Khyber Pass, they had a secret cave, and the cave was where the East met the West. We were in the height of the Cold War, but Russian goods and American goods and the East and West, they went down, and they had a bazaar. It was like a department store. And I thought, isn't this interesting? The market works in spite of all this. Up above, they were shooting and killing each other, but down below, there was still the trading going on. It was like a magnificent Hong Kong, what it was. And I always thought that was fascinating. But it turned out that visual stuck with me and was returned to me, because that's exactly the area where the Battle of Tora Bora wasn't too far from there, and Bin Laden escaped and got into Pakistan. So it's a very historic spot. But the traveling was beneficial to me.
But it was in med school that Paul tells the group his political views started to form.
During my medical training, I came across some books that got me interested. My mother, I remember, sending me the book Dr. Zhivago, and explained how devastating the ultimate big government operates. Then I came across Hayek's book, an Austrian economist who eventually won the Nobel Prize teaching free market economics. And I thought, well, those are my instincts. I didn't know anybody else even thought this way. And here, bright people actually write this way, but they were this big, and of course Keynesianism was this big, but I became convinced they were absolutely right.
Of course, during it all, Paul had a sweetheart who just happened to be a leap year baby.
My wife and I had our first date when she had her 4th birthday, real birthday. She was born on February 29th. So when she was 16, she had a birthday where she got to invite somebody. She invited me, and I accepted. So she was in high school and I was in high school, and she went to a different college and I went to a different college, but then we got married in my last year in college. And I always say, actually I did essentially pay my way through college, but I tell people she worked my way through medical school.
And while he would go on to deliver thousands of babies, Paul explains his career in politics basically happened by accident.
I kept reading and studying and convinced that we were on the wrong track. And just as a lark, I spoke out in 1974 in a campaign because that was that Watergate year, and even in Texas, we only had 3 Republicans then. The rest were Democrats, and the seat that I ran for was held by a Democrat, never by a Republican. So I thought, well, nobody else is going to want to run, so I just volunteered to talk about economics. And I remember well because my wife said it could be dangerous doing this. And I said, why could it be dangerous? I'm just going to, get a few things off my chest. She said, you could end up getting elected. But I assured her that with these views of challenging the status quo and the current system, that no, there's no way people would be interested. She said, no. She says, they will be, and they'll know you'll be telling the truth, and you're going to end up being in Congress. So I really didn't believe that was possible. And then afterwards, I actually thought, well, if I vote my convictions and my oath of office, that would make it automatic. I couldn't get reelected, because it turned out that I had voted by myself more times than everybody else put together for 20 years, because I thought both parties were endorsing the same foreign policy, same monetary policy, the same entitlement system. The rhetoric was different, but it was doing the same thing, so I was very independent-minded. But to my surprise, they kept re-electing me, and today I'm even more pleased than ever that there's a lot more people looking at what our founders gave us, and that we were on the right track at one time, and the American people now know we're on the wrong track, and they're looking for answers.